Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
All right, Pete, Films and Stuff. It is our special weekly stream or skip segment. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
I'm good. We both had shows on HBO Max that we were assigned to this week. I had a comedy called Our Flag Means Death, and you had something called Minx, which I have no idea if that's drama, comedy, horror.
It's a comedy.
Oh, well, tell us about it.
All right, so let's talk about Minx. So Minx is, I hesitate to use the word period piece because period pieces are a bit weird to talk about when we're talking about the 70s.
That's right.
But the premise is that you have this young woman who aspires to be a publisher of a magazine or, an editor-in-chief of her own magazine.
Okay.
And this show is based in California. And she is what we would consider the prototypical and stereotypical hardcore feminist.
She's shaving her armpits?
So this is why I say prototypical.
Oh.
She is what people today or, even 5-10 years ago would consider to be a feminist if you think of what the stereotype of that definition is. In the sense that, she's not going so far as to say down with men, but she's like, look, women should have equality in the workplace. Anything a man can do, a woman can do, that sort of thing. All the appropriate things, and actually not incorrect as well.
Okay.
And so she wants to start her own magazine that basically is all about feminism, right? And why it's a good thing and why women in society need it. But she can't get it off the ground because, surprise, surprise, it's the 70s. It's an overwhelmingly male-dominated industry, as is much of publishing and, not just society in general. So she is having a really hard time getting it off the ground. She goes to this, it's almost like this expo or convention where like a bunch of publishers meet aspiring authors and writers who pitch their ideas for new magazines. And there she runs into a guy who we know as Jake Johnson. Now, Jake Johnson, you'll remember from New Guy.
Johnson.
He's a funny guy. He's really hilarious. He was probably most famous for New Girl. In any case, she runs into Jake Johnson and she's immediately put off by him because he is what they call a pornographer. He makes nude magazines. And he's there because, he's also a publisher. He's got like 15 different magazines under his belt. So he's going for the sake of going. But, that's really it. So she kind of gets turned off by this guy because she's like, well, I'm pro-woman and you're kind of taking advantage of these women, blah, blah, blah. And through their interaction, she accidentally leaves a copy of her magazine that she's made as like a draft. And he reads it, and of course, lo and behold, one episode later, or within the same episode, he gets in touch with her and says, I'm in. I'll make this magazine for you, but we have to make it different.
Okay.
Your message, I don't have a problem with, but your delivery system, I have a problem with because nobody's really going to want to sit down and read a magazine that's pro-feminism. You need a hook. And so they jointly agree that the hook is, we'll make this a male nude magazine.
Playgirl.
Exactly. Kind of like Playgirl. So the idea is that the articles are about pro-feminism.
Yeah.
But the pictures and the things that people are actually going to buy the magazine for are all male nudes, right? So it's like a bunch of firemen and all these kind of stereotypical things you would expect.
It's always the fireman.
It's the most stereotypical thing, right? So... And so this is what the show's premise is. It's basically a battle of wits because she is this very dignified, waspy, very prudish woman who ends up working with a pornographer to make a male nude magazine. But she justifies that by saying, hey, listen, the point is that I'm going to make these pro-feminist articles, and that's how we're going to get around it. That's the basic premise.
And this is a comedy, though.
It is a comedy, and everything is set out as a comedic way. So, the comedy is that it's kind of like The Odd Couple in the sense that Jake Johnson is like this super laid back pornographer who's like ultra sexual, but not in a gross way, but in a way he's a very confident man, and she isn't. She's super uptight. She's set in her ways. She's also incredibly arrogant because she's smarter than everyone else, and that automatically makes her believe that everyone is dumber than her.
Okay.
And that, porn is beneath her. And obviously throughout the course of this season, she, gets a dose of reality when she realizes that the other people she's working with, even though they just seem like they're quote unquote pornographers or porn stars or whatever, they're actually very smart, very capable. They understand the nuances of what it takes to run a magazine, all that kind of things. It's all really quite interesting that way. The premise itself, I'm a big fan of. It's very era appropriate, and especially in 2020 to 2022, it kind of seems all the more appropriate with the, not resurgence because this has always been going on, but even more so a stronger push of the women's rights in the various aspects of life all over the world, right? Not just in the US, but everywhere, Middle East, Asia, we're seeing a lot more protests. We're seeing a lot more movements. So it seems well done in terms of timing. And, there are things that I will caveat is that some people are going to find Joyce, the main character, her Ophelia.
Who is the main character?
Her name is Ophelia Lovey Bond or Lovely Bond, something like that. That's her real life name. The main character's name is Joyce. Some people are going to find her a little grating because she's like, the message is the same constantly. Down with the patriarchy. Men are bad. Women are good. It can be a little grating at times. But the fact is, if you stick through it, you can see that she's also growing a little bit. Although it doesn't seem like much, there is a lot of growth for her. It can definitely seem a bit tiring at times, but of course, we're both men. So we're on the other side of that gender wall.
That's
true. So that appeal will definitely hit differently for you and me than it would maybe for a woman. I will say the good thing about this show, the supporting cast is awesome. It's really, really, really funny. Jake Johnson's got this young, almost assistant role, but she's kind of like her second in command. Lovely lady. Again, I don't know many of these actors. Very, very good in this role. It showcases the capability of everyone in a time where you wouldn't expect it.
Okay.
I saw the whole season. I finished it.
Whoa.
Yeah, and all week I was debating, is this a mooch or is this a subscribe? Now, the fact that I saw the whole season and that I wanted to see the whole season would lead me to believe that it's a subscribe.
Yep.
But honestly, up until the time of this recording, I was still kind of on the fence. And I gotta say, the fact is, it's a subscribe only because, hey, I finished the whole thing. I can't deny that. I finished the whole thing in a week. It's something you should definitely think about watching. I will caveat, as with a lot of the other shows we've been watching lately, there's a lot of nudity in this show.
Oh, really? I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. And there's a lot of male nudity. So if
it's
that's
unusual for a comedy, though. I guess the subject matter, but yes, it's unusual for a comedy. It makes
sense for the subject matter, and it's graphic. So it's surprisingly graphic in that regard. So that's my caveat. If that's the kind of thing that would turn you off, I would say that immediately downgrades this to a mooch, maybe even a skip. But generally speaking, for me,
Is this funny? Is this funny for, like, what's the target market for being funny? Is it more funny for men? Is it more funny for women? Is it more funny for millennials? I mean, I feel like my mom and dad are not going to find this funny. Would, like, my sister find it funny?
Not. Yeah. Definitely. I don't think it's for our parents because I think, A, it'll probably hits a little close to home for our parents in terms of the gender roles.
Yeah.
And B, it's probably a lot more nudity than our parents' generation would be comfortable with, especially because it's male nudity, which is something we rarely, if ever, see on TV. I mean, that's not to say it's the right thing or the wrong thing. We do. If you're going to see nudity on TV, generally speaking, it's a lot more often female nudity than it is male.
And it's just a breast, usually.
And generally speaking, it's just a breast. In this case, it's a lot more, and it's full frontal. So I look at it this way. Would I be comfortable watching this with my parents sitting in the same room? Definitely not.
Right there, that should be our rating system somehow. A logo of two parents and like an X through it.
Yeah,
not appropriate for watching.
Not appropriate. And I know like one, if not both of my parents would kind of cough, look away, and then get up to get a glass of water and then not return.
Suddenly something really interesting is on everyone's iPhone.
Yeah. Oh, is that my phone? Yeah, I gotta go. I have a phone call now. Exactly. It's that kind of thing. Because we're old enough, they wouldn't say anything to us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like they would just be like, I don't want to be watching this with my son.
Gotta respond to this text message.
Exactly. So, having said that, all those caveats aside, I still think it's a must subscribe.
Okay.
I think you'll certainly find things funny about it. I think just knowing you, I'm not 100% sure if this would be a must subscribe for you, but it certainly won't be a skip. I think this will probably be at worst a mooch for you.
Sounds moochy. Okay. That is Minx, HBO Plus, and I have to say, Pete, or HBO Max, Pete, past 3 weeks, I've given you some really good material. I gave you Minx, I gave you Industry, The Bear. That's 3 out of the last 5 that have been must subscribes from you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very, very pleased. Thank you.
A lot of HBO Max. Okay. So, my stream or skip assignment.
I'm so excited for this, by the way. I'm really excited because I've wanted to watch this, but I was on the fence. So, you're going to convert me one way or another.
I will convert you one way or the other. My assignment was a HBO comedy named Our Flag Means Death. It is set in, I guess, the 1700s. Around the golden age of the UK, the golden age of piracy, and it stars Rhys Darby as a wealthy aristocrat, shall we say, who decides that he wants to give up his life as a husband and a doting father, and he wants to acquire a ship and a crew, and he wants to be a pirate.
Okay.
So this is about him and his ragtag crew and their attempts to be pirates. He is, as you can imagine, as an aristocrat, he has essentially no skills. He doesn't have the temperament. He has no gumption. He's a ninny. He doesn't like violence. You know, he's trying to apply all these kind of like business principles in terms of how you motivate crew and so forth. Basically adopting kind of like a business school mindset to piracy. And they get into all sorts of adventures and trouble and always kind of narrowly escape. And somehow or another, his crew actually starts to respect and like him a little bit, even though they've got a very unusual way of being pirates. And they're not necessarily bad guys, but they get into a lot of situations where they do kind of the typical bad things, which is violence and stealing and damage and stuff like that. So a few things about the show. The cast is incredible. Everyone plays their role extremely well. The setting is quite good. I mean, all the scenes on the water are, kind of quite legitimate. With camera angles and tight shots and stuff, you don't actually kind of see so much water, but you legitimately believe that they're on the high seas. The comedy is where I have to give this a little bit of mixed reviews. On the one hand, the type of humor in this show is exactly my type of humor. I have to say, all their jokes are very clever and witty and funny. Contrasted to Hard Sell, which I had like a few weeks ago, where I didn't even think the jokes were funny. In Our Flag Means Death, I really think that they're written in a good way. However, there's something maybe missing from the delivery, or maybe it's too subtle and too sharp that I'm not actually laughing. Like I absolutely concede that it's funny, and it's probably even the way that I would write a show. For example, I mean, the title of the show is Our Flag Means Death, and it's because they decide that they need a flag, and they argue and bicker, what the flag is supposed to represent, right? And they agree, it's kind of like their mission statement or company vision, that their flag is supposed to mean death. And the whole conversation, the whole dialogue, I got it. It was clever. It was witty. It was punchy. It was great timing. But I didn't laugh. Like the whole point of that was for me to be laughing and laughing at that whole crazy type of conversation. And it was almost too like practical and realistic, even though it was like, I thought it was funny and witty and clever, but I just didn't laugh. And I found myself that way. I watched 3 episodes. I found myself that way episode after episode after episode, which was, I liked what they were doing. I liked the scenarios. I liked the lines. I thought it was funny. I just wasn't laughing because there was just a little bit of something missing. And unfortunately, if I'm not laughing at a comedy, even though I admire the writing, I have to give this a skip. I wanted to give it a mooch. It's absolutely not a must subscribe. I really tried to get it up to a mooch. And part of the reason that I had so much, I was really on the fence about it, is because I have to say, if someone gave me this premise and I had to write jokes, I would probably be writing them very, very similarly. It was really, I give them a lot of credit, as I've said it again and again, but I really just was not laughing out loud. There was nothing that like really caught me by surprise. It was almost, kind of like the Newsroom or the West Wing, where it's just written so well, a dramedy dialogue. It was just too tight. And I just couldn't laugh, even though the entire situation I did think was kind of funny or humorous. Anyway, it's a really fine line, but I just wasn't getting there, even though I tried. I really, really wanted to.
Did you find it to be not funny because maybe, in terms of humor, you have 2 kinds of humor, right? You have that dry, intelligent wit, which is seemingly what you're describing here.
Yeah.
And you also, otherwise you have something that's a little bit more slapsticky, right?
Yeah.
Or the third kind might maybe not slapsticky, but might also just be like cringe humor, kind of like Michael in The Office, right? Where he says something so obliviously stupid that we laugh because we're outside, but if we were in that position, we would be like, "Oh God, that's embarrassing."
Yeah.
So is that why? What's your take?
It's definitely intended to be like razor sharp humor. You really have to listen carefully because it's extremely subtle, and I have to say it's almost too subtle. But I have to say, like, if I would have read the jokes on paper, I would have been like, "That's really funny. Okay, that's funny. Like, I get it. That's funny." And I absolutely don't want to criticize the cast because I thought they just did great. But the way that they were speaking, it was so fast and so sharp that was almost like a punchy dialogue in a drama, and really just not hitting the comedy note for me.
Okay.
Even though I was like, okay, that's funny, but I wasn't like laughing out loud. I wasn't like smiling. I wasn't getting anything out of it except just acknowledging like, oh, that was kind of clever. Yeah. Okay. That's funny. All right. That's good. In any case, everything else about it is good. If you like pirates, it's something definitely unique in terms of the genres out there. And I think it has a lot of positive reviews as well, because the cast is not just diverse in terms of how it looks, but they've got a homosexual pirate. They've got a pirate who's going through a gender transition kind of. I guess they've incorporated kind of like modernish issues within the cast, within the storylines in a subtle way, not in a way that's like in your face.
Okay. So it's not like a statement per se.
It's not a statement, but I mean, I'm sure these storylines are going to, continue and probably be expanded upon a little bit. But I have to say, it's overall very, very well produced show, clever, witty. But I have to give it a skip because it's just not hitting the humor for me. In any case, that's why we go through it. We find out if we got a stream or skip, and as always,
yeah, I may, based on what you just said, take down my recommendation for you for Minx, just to temper your expectations, because Minx 2 is not a laugh out loud comedy. It is definitely a comedy, but it's not a comedy that's going to make you, slap your knees in laughter.
I mean, the fact that there's a lot of nudity, and we've seen this in industry as well, right? Which I started watching, and I absolutely back up your claim that it is a must subscribe. Sometimes it's not so much the nudity for the sake of, being voyeuristic and seeing the nudity. It's just because it also pulls you a little bit into like an emotional like roller coaster, right?
Right.
It gets your heart beating. It like changes the pace of the show a little bit. And Minx may do that, whereas Our Flag Means Death, where there's been no nudity at all. I mean, nothing, even like no romantic scenes or anything. That it's just a more of like the 30-minute, traditional sitcom, And if it's not hitting those few major laugh tracks, it's just not really getting me there.
Okay.
So, Pete, as always, you've taken the honor to roll the virtual die. What do we have for each other next week?
Okay, so we are both leaving HBO Max after a couple of straight weeks on there.
Goodbye, HBO Max.
And we're both jumping back into Netflix. You will be watching A Model Family. No idea what that is.
A model, right?
Correct. And I will be watching Better Than Us.
Okay. Do you know anything about any of these?
I don't know anything about either of these, and they're both such relatively generic titles that I couldn't tell you anything about either of these if I wanted to. I can't even make a guess to what Better Than Us is going to be about or A Model Family is going to be about. I couldn't take a guess.
No idea. Well, that's kind of part of the excitement, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point is if I just saw the title, I probably would skip it in the sense that I wouldn't click on it on Netflix. So,
speaking of that, how do you think of our titles this week? You had Minx. I had Our Flag Means Death. What's you're the executive for HBO Max.
I like the Our Flag Means Death. I really like that because even if you don't see, because if I remember correctly, the picture is of a pirate flag. The title picture is. And so you're just like, okay, clearly there's something about piracy involved here.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it's a comedy or anything like that, or a dramedy or however you want to, whatever justify. But I like that title. It's intriguing enough where you just be like, okay, I want to just check it out. Minx, once you see the show, it makes sense why they've called it Minx. You understand where that's coming from and the emotions that word evokes in you. Again, I wouldn't know anything about it. If you told me Minx, if you didn't spell it out and you said, hey, I'm watching Minx, I'd honestly think something along the line of like the Animal Kingdom, like the mink fursuit kind of thing. That title on its own wouldn't do anything for me.
Yeah. It's easy to remember though, and it's unique.
Absolutely.
A Model Family for me is probably I'm sure when we get to it, it's going to be like very descriptive or maybe it's going to be like the total opposite of the family.
Can I take a wild guess? My wild guess that it's going to be like a really dark and twisted version of A Modern Family.
Yeah.
So it's not a sitcom. It's more like a drama where where it's a dysfunctional family.
I agree.
But along the lines of the TV sitcom of A Modern Family.
Yeah. I would imagine it's going to be something different. It's going to be the family that looks like they're perfect. And then once you get to meet them, everyone's got their own drug problems, debt problems, relationship problems. It's a disaster on the inside, but externally they look like the model family.
Yeah.
I have to say it's probably okay, but I think that title doesn't really distinguish it from a lot of other stuff. I could see us either forgetting it or getting it mixed up. Better Than Us, I think, is not bad.
But I mean, like, I can't even think of what it could be about.
That's true. I mean, it could be about aliens. It could be about like high school teens. It could be about
a couples thing. It could be a romance thing. I honestly, it doesn't evoke anything one way or another.
Yeah.
It's so that way. It's super, super generic.
For me, I'm feeling somehow relationships.
Yeah, likewise. But you're right. It could be something extraterrestrial. It could be sci-fi. It could be anything. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. So we've got our homework for next week. A model family for me, and Pete has Better Than Us.
That's right. And by the way, guys, if you're listening, and you should be, we still need more recommendations. We need to fill out our streaming lists of potential shows to watch. Let us know if there's any shows that you want us to put onto our stream or skip lists.
Correct.
Email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Tweet at us at FNDS or the easiest way, drop a comment here after you like and subscribe to our channel.
And be on the lookout for our brand new stream or skip logo.
You'll see it on Twitter soon.
You'll see it on Twitter and Instagram soon. Let us know your feedback on that. Okay, Pete, it's been real, and I wish you happy viewing of Better Than Us in the coming week. We'll talk about it next Saturday.
Likewise, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.